I've been doing DoorDash deliveries for about 6 months now. I live in a pretty rural area, so I don't make as much money as most people do. I usually go out 2 or 3 times on weekday nights when I don't have much homework, but it varies every week. I've never really felt unsafe on the job before, but that completely changed last Friday. There was a huge snowstorm earlier that day, so most of the roads were in bad condition. My truck has 4-wheel drive, and it's great in the snow, so I decided to go out since there most likely wouldn't be any other dashers. It was around 11 p.m. when I was just finishing up for the night. I got an order for a burger joint a few miles away, and the pay was decent, so I took it, planning on going home afterwards. Once I picked up the food, I confirmed that the order was picked up and pulled up the address on my phone. It was only 10 minutes away, and I didn't bother looking to see where the address exactly was. I never do. Once I was within a minute away, I checked the order notes from the customer. It said, "Hand it to me. Call me when you get here." I was still on a main road, but the GPS showed that I was only a few hundred feet away. I slowed down, realizing it was probably ordered from one of the businesses along the road. However, most of the buildings didn't have a visible address from the street, so it took me a few minutes to finally narrow it down. The building was an old mechanic shop, and it didn't look like any of the lights were on. I parked my car out front and pulled up the phone number on the app. The order name was under Audrey, so I dialed the number and waited for her to pick up. For some reason, she wasn't answering, so I texted her that I was here with the food. Even after a couple minutes, there was still no reply, and I started thinking that they gave me the wrong address. All of the lights were off inside the building, and there weren't any other cars in the parking lot. Right when I thought all hope was lost, a light flicked on inside the building. Almost simultaneously, I got a text back from Audrey, saying to pull around to the back. In my experience, I've noticed that many people like to switch things around last minute or add new information when I'm about to drop off their orders. I honestly thought nothing of it, since last-minute accommodations are part of the job. I put my car in reverse and backed out of the parking spot, where I made my way around the parking lot that connected to the back. Well, little did I know, there was another building connected to the car shop that I thought was one whole building. As I slowly drove around the side, I could make out that there was an entire warehouse behind it. The entrance doors were on the side, so I parked my car next to it and got out. I knocked on the door, expecting a quick answer, but nobody came. I waited maybe another minute before calling Audrey again. As soon as the phone started ringing, it was declined, followed by a text. She said to pull all the way around the back, and that's when I started getting sketched out. It didn't make sense why they couldn't just come to the door, but again, this was DoorDash, so running into weirdos wasn't an uncommon occurrence. I put my truck in drive and made my way down the remaining path, before turning left into the back side of the building. It looked like an old freight warehouse, judging by the several garages alongside. They were all closed, except for the very last garage at the far end of the building. As soon as I reached the front of it, it was hard to see inside. It was so dim to the point that everything looked like shadows, and I was honestly about to mark the order as delivered and take off. That was, until I saw a figure emerge around the corner inside. I rolled down the window and yelled, "Audrey?" But the response was not at all what I was expecting. It was a man's voice, who replied, "That's me. I ordered on my wife's account." I was parked maybe 15 feet away from the entrance, so I got out and trudged my way through the snow with the bag in my hand. Once I was within reaching distance, I held the bag out for him to take, but instead of grabbing it, he took a few steps back and said, "Follow me really quick. Let me get you a tip. I have some cash in the office." I told him not to worry about it, but he insisted. I waited by the garage entrance while he disappeared back into the warehouse. I was ready to go home, but I guess it was worth sticking around another minute or two for some extra cash. This entire time, I was not able to make out the face of the guy, due to the poor lighting shining behind him. Again, I waited at least 2 minutes, before yelling inside and saying not to worry about it, and that I was heading out. I got no response, and I'm glad I started walking back to my car, because as soon as I looked back, there were at least 3 people emerging out of the warehouse towards me. I threw the bag on the ground, and taking no time to wait, I sprinted towards my truck as fast as I could, slipping all over the snow. I grabbed my keys out of my pocket and pressed unlock on the key fob, just before they made it to my truck, yelling and screaming at me. I took no time to floor it out of there and call the police. I was asked to drive to the police station and talk with them, so I went straight there. I was no help to them at all, because even though I encountered all 3 of them, I had no idea what they looked like. The police searched the building and it was vacant, so there was pretty much no chance of catching them at that point. The phone they used was stolen that same night, so they used Audrey's account to lure me out there, where I'd be completely alone. I think the scariest part of all of it was that I just had my door replaced 2 months prior. The old one would get jammed and was always a pain to open. If I never had that door replaced, they most likely would have caught up to me, and I probably wouldn't be telling this story. I used to, and still occasionally do, work as a food delivery driver for my dad's Thai food restaurant. If I can remember correctly, the night I'm about to describe happened no more than a year ago, but I can't remember the exact date. The restaurant I delivered for is very popular, but only to a smaller crowd, and we'd usually get orders in the same 3 surrounding towns. It was Thursday, and the amount of deliveries on a Thursday night were always very small. I had a delivery to a house that was about 5 miles away, on this deeply wooded back road, which I had delivered to before. The road was so dark at night that when you turned your headlights off driving down it, you were blind. There was not a street light for at least a couple miles, and the house I needed to bring this food to had to be the most secluded house in the whole town. When I started driving there, the sun was about to start setting. Everything was normal. The food was in the back, and I was listening to music. The 5-mile drive was quick, but when I got there, I noticed the receipt on the bag of food read the number of a house that didn't exist on that road. The number was pretty similar to the house I had in mind, the secluded, abandoned-looking house that I delivered to before. I assumed that the phone girl must have written the wrong number at the front desk, because she did that a lot, and I knew that it had to be this house that called. As I pulled in the driveway, I noticed the sun was at the point of setting, probably 10 or so minutes until it got terrifyingly dark to be in the middle of the woods. There was still some light left, and I had the headlights on bright, so it wasn't as creepy. I took the bag of food and went to the front door. I knocked a few times and waited about a minute. Nobody came, so I knocked again and waited about 20 seconds. I decided to go to the back porch, since that's where everybody was when I delivered to them last time, and I knocked loud, but no answer. I figured that maybe I did have the wrong house after all, so I went back to the car with the food and decided to call the phone number on the receipt. I dialed it up and let it ring, but there was no answer. Then I decided to call my dad to ask him if I was at the wrong house, or if I was given the wrong phone number, because these people were obviously not home. I was the only car in the driveway. As I was looking for my dad's contact number in my phone, a blocked caller came across my screen. I answered my phone, slightly creeped out, and I put the phone up to my ear. Hello? Hi, you called me? It was clearly a man on the other line, with a very distinctive accent that definitely sounded to be foreign. I said yes. Did you order Thai food? I'm here now. As soon as I said that, they hung up. I didn't understand why the man seemed to not want his food. Confused, I called my dad, sitting in the driveway, as the sun was about to set. He told me he would call them and call me back, so I waited. He called me back almost right away, telling me that they'd be right out to get their food. So I guess after all, I was at the right house, and I had the right number. I sat in the driveway for what felt like an eternity, waiting for the customer to come out, or at least call me. A couple more minutes went by, and still no word. I decided to call the customer again, so I waited as I set the phone down on my lap on speaker. It rang for a while before it went to voicemail. I tried this a few more times, but to the same effect. By now, it was almost completely dark, and I had to get back to the restaurant for the other deliveries. Suddenly, I saw a line of light illuminate from one of the blinds in the upstairs window. They looked right at me for a few seconds before shutting the blind. I was relieved that the guy finally figured out that I was there, so I watched the door as I expected him to come out, but for some reason, he never came out. Just before I was about to throw my car in reverse and leave, I got a call again from another blocked caller. I answered it, and it was the same man with the foreign accent from before. When I asked if he wanted to come out and get his food, he replied, "I'm not home right now. Can you just set it inside so it doesn't get cold on the porch?" Since I just saw someone in the window minutes before, I said, "Could you just have whoever's inside come to the front door?" Right when I said that, the call hung up, and that was enough for me to realize that something weird was happening. I backed my car out and went back to the restaurant, immediately telling my dad what just happened. He agreed that something really seemed off, so he marked the house down in our computer to alert us not to serve them if they ever ordered again. I went about doing deliveries for the rest of the night, but that whole situation has not left my mind since. I was out doing Uber Eats a couple weeks ago on a Monday night. I live near a pretty big city, so there's always a ton of orders, allowing me to be more picky and only accept the good ones. For whatever reason, the night was going slow, and by 10 p.m., I'd only made $10 and some change. Every order's payment was too low for the amount of miles I'd have to drive, so I was just sitting in my car in the Walmart parking lot, bored out of my mind. I ended up getting a McDonald's order that was $20, quite a distance away, but I took it, mainly just to have something to do. After picking up the order, I started the GPS directions to the person's house. The GPS led me to the freeway, where I drove for 8 miles or so before getting off at an exit. The rain was coming down non-stop, making the drive on the highway especially difficult. The rain showed no sign of stopping as I kept cruising along the highway, now entering into a more rural area and getting farther away from the big city. I finally reached my exit and saw that I still had 3 more miles before I reached the customer's house. Finally, almost 10 minutes later, I turned on the customer's street. There were hardly any lights on the street, and the houses were spread far apart. I couldn't make out any addresses either. Finally, at the end of the street, my GPS announced that I had arrived at my destination. I carefully pulled into the driveway of an old, small house, with no lights on and no car in the driveway. The rain was still not letting up, so I decided I would run to the front porch and drop off the order as quick as I could. I grabbed the bag of food and sprinted towards the front door, but then I noticed a handwritten sign taped to the front door that said, "Uber Eats, please use back door." I was mainly annoyed, considering that I was already drenched from the freezing cold rain. I told myself to toughen up, drop the food off at the back of the house, and get back to my car to go home. I hurried along the path leading to the back and made my way around it. Just as I was about to set the bag of food down, the back door opened and I jumped. A man was standing there staring at me blankly. "Oh, I'm sorry, you scared me." I gave a nervous laugh as I extended the bag of food to him. I thought he would reply back, or maybe make a joke out of it, or even just acknowledge that I was there. He said nothing, only slowly reaching to grab his bag of food as he held his eyes on me. He seemed strange, and it felt like the guy was staring straight into my soul. Weirded out and freezing, I said, "Have a good night," as soon as he accepted the bag of food. I sprinted to my car, slamming the door shut behind me. I was completely soaked. Before I could even start my car, I noticed the front porch light turn on, followed by the same man stepping outside. He pulled out an umbrella and started walking towards my car with the bag I had just dropped off in his hand. I cracked my window as he walked up, and he said, "The quarter pounder I ordered is missing." I asked him if I could see the bag, because I was almost certain that it was in there before. He kind of hesitated for a second and almost started acting nervous. He held the bag out, and I cracked my window just enough so that I could grab it. I turned on my car light and checked inside. Everything was there. To confirm this, I compared his order with what was in the bag, and everything was 100% correct. He nervously laughed and said something like, "Whoops, guess I didn't see that." I told him it was fine, and as soon as he took it, I started rolling up the window. And I'm glad I did, because as soon as it started going up, the guy pulled out a can of pepper spray and tried to spray it through the crack. I screamed, as it totally took me by shock, and backed out of there as fast as I could. Luckily, it wasn't a direct hit, but some of the spray got in my car. My left eye was completely burning and teared up, but my right eye didn't get it as bad, so I was still able to drive. I called the police and explained everything that happened. When they arrived, the same man was inside his house and arrested. I now have a restraining order on him to hopefully prevent this from happening again in the future when he gets out, but I'm terrified of what could happen to me or someone else once he's freed again.